Follow my story all the way to the end and drop the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this has reached. I drove past the venue twice before I finally pulled in. That's not something I planned on doing. I've driven into unfamiliar parking lots my whole life without a second thought. Construction sites, client offices, courthouses when things got bad with the divorce. I'm not a man who hesitates. But that afternoon, sitting in my truck outside the Halcyon Terrace Event Center in Scottsdale, I put it in reverse and drove back out onto the main road, sat at a red light for 2 cycles. Then I turned around and went back. My son was getting married in 45 minutes. I told myself I left because I forgot to check if my tie was straight. That was a lie. The truth is, I didn't know if I was going to be able to hold it together once I walked through those doors, and I needed 2 extra minutes to decide that I was. So I sat in that truck in a parking lot in Arizona in June, with the AC running and my hands flat on my thighs, and I told myself, you are going to go in there, you are going to be decent, and you are going to watch your son get married if it kills you. I hadn't spoken to my son in 4 years at that point. 4 years. Not because I stopped trying, not because I stopped caring, because somewhere between the divorce and the custody agreement and the years that followed, my son Cooper, who used to fall asleep on my chest watching baseball, who called me Dad before he could pronounce the word right, who came out as Da for 2 full years, had stopped returning my calls, then stopped opening my letters. Then, at some point around his 21st birthday, had told me through a mutual cousin that he thought it was better if we had some space. I respected that. I hated it, but I respected it. And then, 3 months ago, I got an invitation in the mail. Cream-colored envelope, gold lettering. Cooper, James Alderton, and Mia Grace Holloway request the honor of your presence. I read it 4 times, standing at my mailbox in the afternoon heat. Then I went inside and sat at my kitchen table and didn't move for about an hour. My ex-wife, Donna, had remarried when Cooper was 9. His name is Stuart. Stuart Falk. He's an orthodontist in Tempe, which I'm sure has bought him a lot of goodwill over the years. Free braces have a way of doing that. He moved into the house I used to pay the mortgage on. He coached the Little League team I had signed Cooper up for. He was there every single day, which, I'll give him this, is more than the custody arrangement allowed me to be. The invitation did not mention assigned seating. I found out about that when I arrived. A young woman with a clipboard and a headset found me near the entrance and checked off my name with a look that told me she'd been briefed. She led me through the main hall, past the round tables with the white linens, past the bar, past the photo display of Cooper growing up that I was not in a single picture of. And she pointed me toward a table in the far left corner of the room. It was next to the service entrance. Not the bathroom exactly, but close enough that I could hear the kitchen staff on the other side of the wall and smell whatever they were heating. My table had 4 seats. 3 of them were empty. The card at my place said James Alderton, father of the groom, and someone had made an error on the font because it was visibly smaller than the other place cards I'd seen near the front. I sat down. I poured myself a water. I watched the room fill up around me. Cooper looked good. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing him differently now that he was a grown man in a suit. He had my jaw and his mother's eyes. And when he smiled at Mia coming down the aisle, I understood for the first time what people mean when they say a child makes your whole life make sense. Even standing in a corner. Even from a distance. Even after everything. The ceremony was beautiful. I will say that because it was true. Then came the reception. Stuart gave a toast. I had known this was coming. I had told myself I was prepared for it. I was not. He stood up with a glass of champagne and a smile that I had come to recognize over 15 years as the smile of a man who has never once been uncomfortable in a room in his life. He thanked Mia's family. He thanked the guests. He said something funny about Cooper's baseball career that got a big laugh. And then he paused, looked directly at my son and said, "Cooper, I've had the privilege of watching you become the man you are today. I was there when you took your driving test, when you got your college acceptance letter, when you proposed to Mia in our backyard. I've been the one in your corner every single time. And today, walking you toward this moment, well, I just want you to know there is no greater honor in my life than being the father that showed up for you." The father that showed up. The room applauded. People at the tables nearest me turned to look at me with expressions that range from pity to curiosity to the particular discomfort of people who don't know where to put their eyes. I looked at my water glass. I breathed. I did not stand up and say what was rising in my chest. I drank the water instead. What I wanted to say, what I had no right to say in that room, in front of those people, on my son's wedding day, was that I had been showing up too, just not in ways anyone could see from the outside. Let me tell you what the divorce looked like from where I was standing. Donna and I got married young. 24 for her, 26 for me. We had Cooper 18 months later, which is fast, but we were happy, and we meant it. What fell apart between us, I won't get into because it's not the point of this story, and because some of it is still too complicated to say cleanly. What matters is that when the marriage ended, I was the one who moved out. I was the one who became the weekend parent. I was the one who drove 3 hours round trip every other Friday to pick up my son from a house where I was barely tolerated, where the handoffs happened at the curb. Donna and I managed to be civil, mostly in those early years. Then Stuart came along, and something shifted. I don't know whether it was his idea or hers, or whether it happened gradually without either of them deciding it consciously. What I know is that somewhere around Cooper's 7th or 8th birthday, the calls I made started going to voicemail more often. The responses to my texts got shorter. When I showed up for scheduled weekends, there were suddenly family vacations I hadn't been told about, or soccer tournaments that ran long, or stomach bugs that meant Cooper couldn't travel. I went back to the family court twice. The first time, the judge modified the custody agreement slightly in my favor and told Donna to stop interfering with the visitation schedule. The second time, 3 years later, the results were less clear. Cooper was 11 by then, old enough to express a preference, and he told the court-appointed mediator that he wanted to stay with his mom during the school year and that he didn't always feel comfortable at my apartment. I don't know what he'd been told before that conversation. I don't know what questions were asked in what order, or what had been said around the dinner table over the years. I only know that a child of 11 who once called me Da looked at a stranger in a government building and said he wasn't comfortable with me. I drove home from that hearing and sat in my apartment for a weekend without talking to anyone. After that, I tried to be careful. I didn't want to push too hard and make things worse. I didn't want Cooper to feel like he was being pulled in two directions, so I backed off the frequency. I sent birthday cards with checks inside that I later found out were never cashed. I sent Christmas gifts that I eventually stopped sending because a cousin told me they were sitting unopened in a storage room. I called on holidays, and sometimes he picked up, and we would have these careful, polite conversations that felt like talking to a stranger using my son's voice. When he turned 18, I wrote him a letter. A long one, several pages, explaining my side of things as clearly and fairly as I could. I didn't want him to feel pressured or manipulated. I just wanted him to know, at least once, that the version of events he had likely grown up hearing was not the complete picture. I dropped it in the mail and never heard back. Here's the thing about showing up that no one sees. When Cooper was accepted to Arizona State, I got a call from a financial aid office. It turned out that the scholarship he had applied for, the one his mother had listed as their primary funding source in the application, had a gap. A significant one, $42,000 over 4 years that hadn't been accounted for in the planning. Donna and Stuart had apparently assumed the scholarship would cover more than it did. The financial aid officer had found my contact information in the file because I was still listed as a parent. She was calling to discuss options. I said I would cover it. She asked me to confirm. I confirmed. I set up a payment plan that came out of my account every semester for 4 years. I asked her not to contact my son about it. I didn't want Cooper to feel obligated to reach out to me in exchange for something I was doing because I wanted to do it, not because I wanted something back. I don't know if she honored that request entirely. If Cooper ever found out during those 4 years, he never said anything to me. When he graduated, I sent a card. Donna later told a mutual relative that Cooper assumed the money had come from a government loan that was quietly forgiven. I never corrected that story. There was the car, too. When he was 22 and working his first real job, I found out to the same cousin. She was the family's unofficial clearinghouse for information that was never shared directly, that Cooper's car had died and he was borrowing Mia's to get to work. I sent a cashier's check to the dealership he'd been looking at, routed through the cousin, with a note that said it was a gift from family and to let Cooper decide whether he wanted to know who it was from. I asked her to let him make that call. He didn't make it. I told myself that was fine. that the point was never for him to feel indebted or grateful or like he owed me a relationship. The point was that he was my son. That was the whole point, start to finish. The reception went on for about 2 hours after Stuart's toast. I ate what was served. I smiled at the people at my table when they finally sat down. 2 of Mia's elderly great aunts and a family friend I didn't know, who spent most of the meal looking at his phone. I watched Cooper and Mia dance to a song I didn't recognize. I watched Stuart put his hand on my son's shoulder and say something that made Cooper laugh with his whole face, the way he used to laugh when he was small. I was planning to leave quietly. I decided, somewhere between the salad course and the entree, that I was not going to do anything that made this day about me. I would shake a hand or two near the exit, find my car, and drive the 2 hours back to my house in Tucson. I was heading toward the door when I felt a hand on my arm. I turned around. It was Mia. My daughter-in-law, technically, as of about 3 hours ago. I had met her exactly once, briefly, at a Thanksgiving 5 years ago, when things were still marginally less frozen between Cooper and me. She was kind then, and she was kind now, and the fact that she had walked across a crowded reception hall to find me before I slipped out told me something about her character. "Mr. Alderton," she said. And then she stopped, because she clearly hadn't planned what came next. She looked like she was choosing between several things to say and wasn't sure which one was right. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Your wedding was beautiful." "Cooper wanted you here," she said. "I want you to know that. He didn't know how to say it, but he did." I nodded, "Know how to say it, but he did." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to respond to that directly. She said, "There's something I've been trying to figure out whether to tell you. I talked to Cooper about it this morning and he said it was my decision." I waited. "When we were setting up the payment plan for the venue," she said, "I went through all the old financial records because I'm the one who handles the money in our house, and I found the payment confirmations from Arizona State, the ones from your account." The air between us went very still. "He didn't know," she said. "Cooper didn't know until 3 months ago. When I showed him, he didn't say anything for a long time, and then he mailed you the invitation." I stood there in the doorway of my son's wedding reception in a suit I'd bought for the occasion, with the kitchen smell behind me and the music in front of me, and I thought about a cream-colored envelope arriving in my mailbox in the afternoon heat. "He's not good at this yet," Mia said. "He's working on it. I think he wanted to start with showing up." I thought about what that meant. Showing up. I thought about a toast I'd heard an hour ago. "Tell him I understand," I said. She shook her head. "Come tell him yourself." There's no version of that walk across the reception hall that doesn't sound like a movie, so I'll just say it felt nothing like a movie. It felt like every awkward, unfinished thing between 2 people who used to know each other without trying. Cooper was standing near the bar talking to someone when Mia put her hand on his arm and he turned around and saw me. He looked exactly like he did when he was 9 years old and had broken something in the house and wasn't sure yet whether he was in trouble. I said, "You clean up well." He laughed. It was a short, broken kind of laugh, but it was real. We didn't hug right away. We stood a foot apart for a moment, both of us deciding, and then he took a step and I took a step, and that was that. He's taller than me now by about 2 inches, which is something I missed happening, and I noted that was something that wasn't quite grief but was close enough to it. "I didn't know," he said into my shoulder. "About school, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said, into my shoulder. "About school, I didn't know," I said. "She told me other things too," he said. "Mom, over the years, about why you stopped coming around." "I never stopped," I said. "I just got quieter about it." He pulled back and looked at me, and he had his mother's eyes, and I hope to God he had something of mine too that wasn't just a jawline. "I have a lot of questions," he said. "I have time," I said. "We didn't solve anything that night. That would be a lie. What we did was exchange phone numbers, which sounds small and maybe is small, but when you've been 2 years without a direct line to your own son, it doesn't feel small." Mia took a photo of the 2 of us near the end of the evening, which she sent me the next morning with a text that said, "He asked me to send this to you." I have that photo as my lock screen now. Cooper and I have been talking once a week since the wedding. Sometimes it's 20 minutes. Sometimes it's 2 hours. He's asked me about the court hearings. He's asked about the gifts and letters. There were a few conversations early on that were painful enough that I had to put the phone down and take a walk before I could respond, because what he'd been told over the years required careful, patient correction rather than the defensive reaction that came naturally. I'm not going to claim his mother as a villain. I think she did what she believed was right for her family, and I think the version of events she gave Cooper was the version she had convinced herself was true. People do that. People rewrite their own stories until the rewrite feels like memory. What I know is that Cooper is asking questions now, which means he stopped accepting the only version he was given. That took courage. I'm not going to undercut it by being angry at the years it required. There is no dramatic confrontation at the end of this story. No courtroom moment, no public reckoning, no toast where the truth comes out in front of 200 people. What there is, instead, is a Sunday phone call. What there is a son who says, "Talk to you next week, Dad," before he hangs up. Not goodbye, not take care, Dad. What there is enough. For now, it is enough. I've thought a lot about what causes things to turn out the way they do. Not in any mystical sense. I don't think the universe was keeping score on my behalf. But I do believe that the choices a person makes quietly, over a long stretch of time, with no audience and no guarantee of return, have a way of eventually becoming visible. Not because someone arranged it that way. Just because the truth is heavy and it sinks through eventually. I paid Cooper's tuition for 4 years. I bought a car he needed and asked nothing in return. I wrote letters he never opened and sent birthday checks he never cashed. None of that was noble. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't playing a long game or engineering a reunion. I was just a father who couldn't stop being a father even when there was no acknowledgement that I still was one. That's not virtue. That's just what it costs to live with yourself when the alternative is doing nothing. What I've come to understand is that integrity isn't what you do when someone is watching. It's what you do when the only witness is you. For years, I made decisions that no one would ever credit me for. And I had to be at peace with that. That required something I didn't know I had. A kind of quiet stubbornness that wasn't about pride. It was about staying consistent with who I had decided I was, even when the evidence available to my son painted a completely different picture of me. That's the hard part nobody talks about. You can do the right thing and still lose the narrative. Someone else can stand up in a room full of people and take credit for a child you never stopped loving, and there's nothing you can say in that moment that won't make you look small and bitter and defensive. So you say nothing. You drink your water, you breathe, and you trust, not in anything supernatural, but in the basic fact that records exist, that paper trails don't lie, and that a sharp young woman named Mia, who handles the household finances, will eventually find a payment confirmation from an account she doesn't recognize. Cooper's working through a lot right now. I watch him process the gap between what he was told and what actually happened, and I try not to rush him. That processing requires intelligence, the willingness to look at evidence that contradicts your existing beliefs and update accordingly, even when updating means acknowledging that the people who raised you weren't entirely honest with you. That is genuinely hard. Most adults never fully manage it. The fact that my son is doing it at 28, in the middle of a new marriage, while building his own life, that tells me something about who he is. Something I'd like to think came from me, at least in part. What I'd say to anyone who's in the place I was 5 years ago is this: keep your side of the ledger clean, not for recognition, not for the eventual reveal, just because you will have to live inside the decisions you make. And a life built on consistent, quiet decency is the only kind you can actually sleep in. The relationship I have with Cooper today, one phone call a week, careful, and still a little unsteady, but real, didn't happen because I was vindicated publicly. It happened because Mia found a document that told the truth I had been living privately for years. You can't control the story other people tell about you. You can only control whether the facts, when they finally surface, say something you're proud of.